Hey, welcome back to Draven's Den. I want to apologize for the little bit of inconsistency over the last couple of weeks. Had a funeral last week. It really caused me some reflection. You know, when you see people see families get together on that final day and they say goodbye, and friends too. I was fortunate enough to overhear a story about the lady that passed away. A young man had come up to the lady's son, and he had said that early on in his life he was in real dire straits, addicted to certain things and doing some things with his life where he just didn't know where he was going and where he was going to end up. But he met that lady, and it turned his life around. The love and compassion that she showed, it really changed his life forever. He ended up buying his first house and having a family. And it's those moments when you look around at the impact of people in your life and you give them an extra hug, you shake an extra hand and you say thank you. I know there's a few people in my life that I've always tried to say thank you to and tried to show them just how much they meant to me. So if you're listening right now, and over the years, you've helped me out when I was in dire straits myself, I want to say thank you. And I truly, from my heart, appreciate you. But let's get the ball back rolling in history and learn a few things. What do you say? History has a strange sense of timing. Some days produce quiet milestones. Others drop revolutions, inventions, famous speeches, and bizarre human behavior all at once. The first full week of March has a little bit of everything. A telephone that changed communication forever. A speech that steadied a nation during economic collapse. A moment that pushed the civil rights movement into living rooms of America. And proof that no matter what century we live in, people are still capable of doing unbelievably dumb things. Let's step into it. This is Draven's Den. On March 3rd, 1845, Florida officially became the 27th state of the United States. At the time, Florida was still a sparsely populated frontier territory. By 1850, the population had grown to about 87,000 people, according to the Florida Department of State, which is interesting when you consider that today, Florida is home to an estimated 1.3 million alligators, according to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, meaning at one point, there were significantly fewer Floridians than there are currently alligators. And yet somehow, we're still surprised when the phrase Florida Man appears in the headline. History shows us Florida began as a strategic territory. Today, it's a strategic territory for alligators and questionable life choices. Also, on March 3rd, 1865, Congress established the Freedmen's Bureau, formerly known as the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. This was a pivotal moment during the closing weeks of the Civil War. The Bureau was created to assist millions of formerly enslaved people, along with poor white citizens in the South who had been displaced by the war. It played a crucial role in rebuilding lives by providing food, clothing, and medical care, legal assistance to help secure labor contracts and family rights, and education. In fact, the Bureau helped establish over 1,000 schools and supported the founding of several historically black universities, including Howard University and Fisk University. It was one of the earliest federal attempts to rebuild a society after conflict. Construction wasn't just political, it was human. On March 4th, 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt took office during one of the darkest economic moments in American history, the Great Depression. Banks were collapsing. Unemployment was soaring. Confidence in the economy had almost completely evaporated. And during his inaugural address, Roosevelt delivered a line that would echo through generations. "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." It was exactly what the country needed in that moment. Confidence during collapse, leadership during uncertainty, and proof that sometimes the most powerful tool a leader has is reassurance. On March 5, 1770, tensions between American colonists and British soldiers exploded into violence in Boston. Outside the Custom House on King Street, a British sentry named Private Hugh White became involved in an argument with a young apprentice. Soon, a crowd of between 300 and 400 colonists gathered. They shouted, they taunted the soldiers, and they threw snowballs, ice, and stones. British soldiers eventually fired into the crowd. 5 colonists were killed. Among them was Crispus Attucks, a sailor of African and Native American descent who is widely considered the first casualty of the American Revolution. Also killed were Samuel Gray, James Caldwell, Samuel Maverick, and Patrick Carr. The event itself was relatively small compared to the battles that would follow, but Patriot leaders used it as powerful propaganda to rally colonial resistance. Sometimes history isn't defined by scale. It's defined by perception. On March 6th, something I absolutely love, 1912, the Oreo cookie was introduced by the National Biscuit Company, better known today as Nabisco. The first Oreo was sold to a grocer in Hoboken, New Jersey. Originally called the Oreo biscuit, it was manufactured in Nabisco's factory in Chelsea, New York City. The street where the factory once stood is now officially named Oreo Way. But here's the interesting part. Oreo wasn't actually the first cookie of its kind. It was created as a competitor, or depending on who you ask, a knockoff, of the Hydrox cookie, which has been introduced 4 years earlier. So yes, one of the most famous snacks in human history started as a copycat cookie, and somehow it still became the global champion of milk dunking. Also on March 6, 1981, legendary news anchor Walter Cronkite delivered his final broadcast on CBS Evening News after 19 years behind the desk. Cronkite was often called the most trusted man in America. He ended his final broadcast the same way he had ended thousands before it. And that's the way it is. Sometimes a single voice can define an entire era of journalism. On March 7, 1965, about 600 civil rights marchers attempted to walk from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, to demand voting rights. The march was led by John Lewis and Hoja Williams. But as they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they were met by Alabama state troopers and a group of men deputized by Sheriff Jim Clark. When the marchers refused to disperse, the officers attacked. They used clubs, tear gas, and mounted charges on horseback. At least 17 marchers were hospitalized. Dozens more were injured. John Lewis himself suffered a fractured skull. Television cameras captured the brutality, and those images shocked the nation. Within months, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. History often moves forward when injustice becomes impossible to ignore. March 8th is recognized around the world as International Women's Day, a day celebrating the social, economic, and political achievements of women throughout history, from science to politics to social movements. As W.E.B. Du Bois once said, "There is no force more powerful than a woman determined to rise." And I'm pretty sure husbands everywhere can agree with that. On March 9, 1959, the Barbie doll made her debut at the American International Toy Fair in New York City. Created by Ruth Handler, co-founder of Mattel, Barbie was revolutionary because she represented something different. Instead of being designed as a baby doll, Barbie was designed as an adult character, allowing children to imagine future careers and lives. It quickly became one of the most recognizable toys on Earth, and whether you loved it, hated it, or stepped on it barefoot at 3 a.m. in the hallway, it absolutely left a mark on pop culture. On March 10th, 1876, Alexander Graham Bell made the first successful telephone call to his assistant, Thomas Watson, in Boston. His famous words, "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." 3 days earlier, Bell had received the patent for the telephone. And with that one sentence, human communication changed forever. From telephones to smartphones, to people arguing on the internet about absolutely everything. Progress. Ain't we just a dandy species? Now I'm going to introduce a new segment, WTHP. Every week we'll highlight a moment where humanity makes us ask one simple question. What the heck, people? This week's entry comes from Florida, because of course it does. A pickleball match at a Florida country club recently escalated into a full-blown fight involving roughly 20 players. The argument reportedly started over game rules. It ended with people swinging paddles and a full-on brawl. Let me repeat that. A pickleball game turned into a country club riot. This is a sport where the most aggressive movement usually involves walking briskly towards the snack table. Somewhere in that chaos, someone definitely yelled, "This is not how a pickleball was meant to be played." Yeah. History books may not record this moment, but we will. History isn't just presidents, wars, and inventions. It's families. If your family has a story, military service, immigration, survival, strange local legends, or a moment that shaped your family's future, reach out. The Family Thread series exists to preserve those stories before they disappear. Because the most important history is the kind that gets passed down. Send those stories to dravensden@gmail.com. March 3rd through March 10th reminds us that history moves in many directions at once. A nation rebuilding after Civil War. Revolution brewing in colonial America. Civil rights demanded in the streets. Technology transforming how humans communicate. And occasionally, a group of grown adults starting a fight over pickleball. History is serious, but it's also human. And humans are complicated creatures. I'm Stan Miles, and that's the rest of history. Stay curious.